What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I am here on a mammoth day in the world of mixed martial arts. The former, I suppose you could call him, which he is, UFC heavyweight champion, the lineal, maybe you could call him, UFC heavyweight champion, has made part of his decision anyway on his next step, and I wanted to come on here and talk about it. And I want to give it to you from a few different aspects, I suppose, from what I think of it from Francis's point of view, what I think of it maybe from the sports and spoiler alert, the PFL's point of view, where he has signed, but also I think from the fans' point of view, because that's something that we, it's easy to forget about that, and it's easy to look past it. But I think it's one of the most important things. And why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't the people who tune into the sport every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night have their opinion voiced and have their opinion heard? So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that and why it's either good or bad for the fans, or why the fans should look at it in a certain way. I think with this situation though, I think the first thing to say is we can look at it in a lot of different ways. I remember I did a podcast when Francis left the UFC at the start, and I remember saying, I really hope everything goes well for him, but I fear it might not. I'm that's an okay thing to say. It's okay to say, right, I think you made the wrong decision, but by God, I hope I'm wrong about that. And am I wrong at this stage? Will I say that? I would say I'm more wrong than I thought I was, but we'll get into all of that. I don't know, was I fully, completely wrong? Because I think some of the points I made are still stand, but we'll get to that. But what I'm happy with today, right, just to start this off here, because I'll get into a few of the more maybe intricate points of it in a second. I'm glad that he seems happy, right? And I have said multiple times, I don't know if Francis knows what he actually wants to make him happy. Because I felt like there was demand after demand after demand after demand, and different demand after different demand, and not even demands, but not necessarily unnecessary things, but things that are where's this coming from? What's the reason for this? And I'm sure he had many reasons for many things. But from my point of view, and I'm sure for a lot of people's point of view, it kind of looked like, can Francis actually ever be happy? And not ever be happy. He should look for all of those things. It's funny. I watched the Michael Jordan documentary that doesn't have film that doesn't actually have Michael Jordan in it, the one about Nike and all. And it was kind of like this. You're looking. They knew what they wanted, right? In Michael Jordan's family and his agent, they knew exactly what they wanted, and they wanted. They wanted equity, and look what it got them in the end, and all, but the equity of something that's very different to the equity Francis has got. And it felt like Francis was the opposite. It felt like he kind of had an idea of what he wanted. He wanted this, abstract kind of freedom, and in a way, he has gotten a kind of abstract freedom. But he also has gotten, it feels like, a settled position for himself that now he can move forward from, and that is actually the key. That to me is the key to all of this. And some people who look at it from, should he stay with the UFC? Should he go where he's going now and doing what he's doing? I think there are valid arguments for both of them, if I'm being honest, right? And from Francis' point of view, from the both promotions' point of view, from the sports point of view, and from the fans' point of view, I think there are pros and cons for absolutely all of them. But from when I say there, from Francis' point of view as a fighter, but from Francis' point of view as a person himself, I don't think you could be a fan of Francis or be a human being and look at him now and the way he's speaking and the way he's I got what I wanted, and not be happy for him. Even if you disagree with the decision he made, or even if you agree with whatever, he got what he wanted in the end. Now, did he always know what he wanted? I'm skeptical about that, but he got what he wanted. He's found a place where he is happy, and that is absolutely brilliant. And I think it'd be remiss of anyone to start off, whether it's a pro Francis or an anti Francis podcast or video, and not start it off with that point, because fair play to them. I've said it throughout all of this. Maybe I don't agree with. I agree with some of what he did. I don't agree with other parts of what he did, but I always and I think a lot of people, and you should be, appreciative of his want to do what he wants, right? And he did that the whole way through, and fair play to him. Mistakes along the way, absolutely. Did he get to ultimately where he wanted to get to? I'm not too sure. Maybe it's still time to get there, but he did it his own way, and you have to respect that for him. Right, so let's talk a little bit about the analysis of the whole situation and all of this. And, there'll be other people doing maybe the financial analysis and I know we have the Fight Business podcast here, and John Nash will do it and stuff. I want to give it to you from kind of my point of view and my thinking of it. Maybe I'm not totally right, but I'll give it to you from my point of view. So this is the way I look at it, right? I look at it in three ways, and I think I look at it in the short term, the medium term, and the long term for Francis, and for was it the right decision, what decision was made, what it'll actually do. So the decision that was made today, and I'll get into a few of the integers and stuff of it later on, and a few of the actual points. I'm sure a lot of people have read at this stage. If you don't know, he signed for just the basics. He signed for PFL, a high 7-figure contract. So what would that be? 7 to 9 million-ish, 6 to 9 million per fight, and 2 to 3 fights, right? So, and plus equity in PFL, whatever that means, part of the net of the event, whatever that means, and all of this, okay? Fair enough. So the short, medium, and long term. So Francis is part of this as well. He's not going to be fighting in the PFL until the middle of next year. So I would call that probably the medium term. If he is going to have a boxing match or whatever in between it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to start with the medium term, right? Has he won in the medium term? Has he got a good deal in the medium term? I would answer those two questions probably a slightly different way. Has he got a good deal in the medium term? I would say yes. If this deal was given to Francis at any other time, or given to any fighter at any time, is this a good deal to have an MMA fight in our current landscape for, let's say minimum, like let's say 5 million, right? They said the higher 7 figures, but let's say, let's say 7, right? Let's say 7, because it's the same number as the UFC had. So let's say 7 million. He has gotten 7 million. According to what they're saying. Now, whether we believe it or not, maybe another thing, but according to what they're saying, 7 million to have an MMA fight. In this landscape, is that good money? That's great money. That is great money. And if you were saying it's not great money, and you said it was great money 3 months ago when the UFC were offering basically the same thing, you're fooling yourself, and you're fooling no one else. So that is great money. It's absolutely great money. He has gotten as well things that, like, I said the equity and other things. How much will they actually earn him? I don't know is the simple answer. If you want my opinion or want my slight analysis, I would say probably not as much as he thinks, or as most people would think maybe. And also it'll depend on when you get it, how long you get it for, how much of it you get, type of thing. So I think the base is the base, and I don't think more than that can be guaranteed. There's a reason they called it the base a guarantee, because it is a guarantee and nothing else is guaranteed. So it's, let's say, an even-ish amount with what the UFC were giving him. Now, let me read one part from John Nash's report that I think was very, very critical here. And I'll read it. So, quote, "It is therefore very likely that the UFC offer would have paid more over those 3 fights," so the medium term here we're talking about, "than the PFL deal will, as the Jones fight would have potentially made him more than $10 million once his pay-per-view bonus was added and sold, as well as people in the industry assume it would. That is, it would have paid more as long as he fought Jones and did not lose the title during those 3 fights." Right? So there is a risk he could have lost to Jones and not earned as much in fights after that, but he still would have had his base pay. I'm sure he would have gotten a big fight, because they're not going to give him an easy fight if he's on 7 million base or whatever. Would it have been on pay-per-view for the second and third fight? I would almost certainly say yes. Would it have been as big as the Jones fight? Probably not. So you look at that, right, and you say, so John Nash is saying there basically he would have gotten pay-per-view points. I think is it. So he would have, it would have made him potentially 10 million. And it actually does say it there, once his pay-per-view bonus was added. So that's it. The pay-per-view bonus in PFL, and I'm taking this as my opinion, I don't think it will be as much, because I don't think he will sell as much when he's fighting someone who is not John Jones, or who is not the interim UFC champion, or who's not the next guy that the UFC put up there. It's just the way it goes. If he fights Bruno Cappelozza or Verdum or Ente Deja, or they get someone else, and we'll talk more about that later on in who he should fight and all of that, he's not going to get as much, right? So the medium term is an interesting debate, because in my opinion, and I think in most people's thoughts, he has kind of done great for himself in the medium term. Would the UFC have been better for him in the medium term? I think yes, undoubtedly. Without a shadow of a doubt. I think the money he would have generated from the John, and we're talking monetarily here, which we have to, because we can't put a monetary value on everything else, and Francis is a value on everything else, and this is why he's done it, and that's his prerogative. But monetarily, for a second, it feels like the medium term would have paid longer in the UFC, but you have to add everything else into account as well, which he wanted. Less money, but a lot of money still. So I call that a success in the medium term. Is this big a success? Were the people who were saying like you're after fumbling the bag here completely wrong? No, they weren't completely wrong. And I see a lot of people like laughing, and I didn't necessarily say fumble the bag, because I thought he'd get a lot of money short term, which we'll talk about in a second. I thought he'd get money medium term, but the long term was my biggest issue, and that is obviously still to be seen. But it's not quite that he has fumbled the bag. It's that he's got another pretty good bag, to be honest. There's a couple of bags going around, and he managed to pick up one of them. And the thing about it is, this slightly lower bag allows him to get a much bigger one in the short term. So let's talk about the short term, right? And that's where the freedom comes into it. And the freedom to have a boxing match was always something massive for Francis. And we know a lot of people might have been fooled by saying, oh, Francis just wants this and this and this and this. He wanted to get paid a lot of money. And let's be honest here. And he is banking on himself short and medium term here. There's no doubt about that. And in the short term, it's going to be very interesting what happens, because I said earlier on, what's the short term? Let's say the short term is the next year. The next, maybe a little bit longer even. And he has said he is open to, I'm reading here, non-exclusive with regards to boxing. So he's allowed to box, and the PFL are allowing him to box. It's part of his deal. He's wanting to box himself, and he's going to look for a boxing match before he has an MMA fight, is the general gist of it. Now, that is very interesting, right? Because to get on the same monetary value as the difference say between the PFL and the UFC, if there is any even, you're probably going to have to earn, maybe a few million, or maybe a big chunk of change to, not necessarily make it worth it, but to be like winning on top of winning on top of winning, if you get me. To like be, I am so right. I made such a great decision. It was unbelievable. And I'm very hopeful that he can get that. And when I say hopeful, I hope that he can get it. Am I hopeful that it'll happen? No, to be honest, because I'm not sure. Now, I don't know how the boxing world works a lot. And plus, all the things that he asked for in the MMA world, which he has gotten, right, from PFL. And now we know he's gotten it from PFL because PFL desperately wanted to get him. And fair play to him. We'll talk more about PFL in a few minutes. But he has gotten that from PFL, as I said, because he madly wanted it. He won't get any of those things in boxing. Like, if, let's say he's the B-side in a big boxing match, then he doesn't need a guarantee for his opponent, because his opponent will be getting more than him, and he can look out for himself with the amount of money he wants to get. He's talking about looking out for the next generation with his, PFL Africa thing and all of that, which is absolutely great. Is he going to get any of that in boxing? No. Like, is he going to get a split of everything when he goes to boxing, the equity and the thing and all? No, he's not. Maybe he can get a good deal where he gets a split of, the pay-per-view or whatever in boxing and all of that. But I think it's very, it's going to be very hard for him to get, a Francis Ngannou PFL deal in boxing or a Floyd Mayweather deal in boxing or something like that. Very hard. No, he's done it once, so can he do it again? Maybe. But also, who's he going to box? There's boxing experts out there who know the scene a lot better than me, so maybe I'll be able to tell you that answer. But I think what he has very smartly done here, and this is almost the biggest thing I gave him credit for, and I had never even thought of this, but I think it's smart. To do it backwards like this, to do the medium term before the short term, is really smart, because he's signed a contract with PFL and it doesn't matter what happens in boxing. So let's say miraculously he gets an Anthony Joshua fight, he gets a Tyson Fury fight, he gets a Deontay Wilder fight. Look, we all know what's going to happen, and no disrespect to Francis, we know he's going to lose that fight spectacularly, as any MMA fighter would. It's a different sport, and any boxer would if they fought Francis. But he's going to get a lot of money, right? And my worry for Francis always, in the medium and short term, was where would he go next? I knew he would be able to get to a Bellator, to a PFL, to a one championship, but did I think he could get this sort of deal from any of them? In the long term, no. In the short term, I thought maybe. Not as good as this, but maybe. But what he has done is secured a massive deal in the medium term that will allow him to do whatever he wants short term, for it to end however it may end, and he still has that guaranteed medium term money. That's brilliant. That is brilliant. So even if Francis goes out and he does this boxing thing, right, there's talks of a warm-up boxing match, and let's say that doesn't go well, you still have a pretty good payday here medium term from PFL, right? You go out there and you get a warm-up boxing match. It goes well, you win it, and then maybe they throw you in there. This is the greatest combat athlete in the world, the scariest man on the planet, and Deontay Wilder's looking for a boxing match. You might go in there and you might get your 5 million or whatever it might be. Wonderful pay packet. You lose that fight and you go back to PFL. Absolutely sorted. Absolutely fantastic. So I think the medium-term deal has almost guaranteed the short term to be a success no matter what happens. Like, even if he loses to some journeyman heavyweight boxer, look, he's done his boxing match and now he can go back and earn a lot of money. Best case scenario is he gets a massive amount and goes back and fights for the PFL in a massive amount. Like, I thought Francis was always going to get a good payout in boxing and then struggle with MMA. In fact, he's already got the good payout in MMA, so he's not actually as reliant on the boxing as he once might have been, which is absolutely brilliant. I'm slightly shocked about it. I didn't think he'd be able to do that well. Now, is this deal as amazing as maybe they're making it sound? Like, it's definitely kind of written and been put out there from the writer's favour. Let's be honest about that. I sent it to a friend of mine who works like in finance and stuff like that, and he kind of said to me, well, this is written in a very favourable way for Francis himself, not necessarily even for the PFL, because the PFL are doing what they need to do, and they're going to be paying Francis a good bit of money. But it's definitely written from Francis's point of view in a favourable way. But still in all, you forget that. Still a very good deal. So the long term is the only other thing. So as I said, medium term, very good. Is it as good as the UFC's deal medium term? No, but it's still very good. And it allows you to have a guaranteed successful short term, or a guaranteed not as important short term as maybe it would have been if you didn't get that big medium term deal. So win-win, a real win-win there. Or even maybe you call it a draw medium term, but a win-win. Long term, I'm very interested to see how that works out. And that's a question we won't have answered and can't have answered. Like, we'll have the short term answered, in the short term, obviously, very quickly, as the saying would suggest. Whether it's okay or brilliant, right? I don't think it can be bad at this stage, in terms of how it lays out the next few years of your career. But the fact that this PFL deal is only 2 or 3 fights is very interesting. Now, if he goes out there and beats Deontay Wilder, we can forget about this conversation, because he'll be having bigger boxing matches and he'll be set for life, and we can all forget about it. But let's talk about that in an unlikely way it is. If that happens, I'll come on here and I'll do another video. Okay? Long term, how does it work? How is it going to work? And that is a guessing game that we could all do, right? I still seem to think it's going to be tough long term, as I thought when I made that video. I think I had Spencer on probably 2 or 3 months ago, you know? And I was a lot more critical of Francis then than I am now, and rightly so. He's proved me wrong in a lot of ways. Although in some ways I still think, because like if you think about it, right, what I said then was, can Francis get a big boxing match and get a big payday? I thought yes. Whether it's Fury or whoever it might be, I think it might be a struggle. Could he get someone maybe, Dillian White or something like that, and a good payday out of it, or maybe one of the top guys? I thought, yeah, he could do it, and then he would get, the payday from an MMA organization, maybe for 1 or 2, and then it's going to be hard from then on in. Now, and even then, I didn't think that. And when I said a payday for 1 or 2 fights, I mean maybe £1 million payday or dollar payday or whatever it might be. Not anything like this. So this blows that out of the water, right? But then I was like, what's going to happen long term? Are they going to be able to keep paying him £1 million per fight for 4, 5, 6, 7 fights to recoup the amount that the UFC offered him, right? So if we get through, let's say he has the 3 fights in PFL, he's had the big boxing match, well, maybe he's set for life at that stage. And we've no need to have the long-term chat, right? Maybe he gets, let's say if it's 7 million, that's 21 million in 3 fights. We can take away taxes and all of that. But let's say there's a boxing match as well. And let's say at the end of all of that, Francis leaves with 20 million in his pocket, right? He might need any long term after that. Maybe he goes, thanks for the cheese, guys. Good luck. I'm gone. Right? Maybe he thinks that. And look, I hope that happens. Because that's what you want for all MMA fighters. If you're someone covering the sport, if you're a fighter, if you're a fan, you should want people to absolutely win the game. Now, as I said, we'll talk about it from the fans' point of view in a second. But let's say that doesn't happen, right? And he maybe doesn't earn as much as that, still has a good bit of money in the pocket, but wants to continue to fight on. Will the PFL be willing to offer him the same deal after 3 fights? And the question, I suppose, adjunct to that is, will his pay-per-views sell well enough for them to be able to offer him that amount of money after those 2 to 3 fights? And that is a very interesting question. Now, I think you ask any person who's covered MMA over the last few years or who pays attention to this, and I'd say they would probably say no. Will Francis do better than almost everyone outside the UFC, or even everyone outside the UFC in pay-per-view? I think yes. But will he be able to do the 500,000 buys, the million buys, the 1.5 million buys, that much, that region? I don't think so. Will they be able to get an opponent good enough to do it? If they could get Brock Lesnar, yeah, he could. He could absolutely do it. If they could get John Jones out of the UFC contract, yeah, absolutely. But those lads don't grow on trees. They're not around all the time. An opponent for Francis is going to be hard. Could they get someone? Maybe they could get someone. And one of them will be big. It'll be very hard to do 3. So that's the worry, I think, long term. But like, long term mightn't matter, as I say. Long term might not matter. So that would be the only thing I would say that is still a question for Francis in terms of it maybe being an issue going forward, right? And we, as I said, maybe we could talk about that in future again. I'll read a couple of the points here of the actual, some of the reporting that has come out since. Some from John Nash, who's done a great job, and some from Francis as well. So here's some from the Francis interview that he did over on, I think it was his own YouTube channel. He said the PFL deal has been agreed for 2 months. Talks about PFL Africa, which I mentioned earlier on. I'm just reading this out because I don't want to miss anything in case you're watching this to get up to date with it. He's talking about a tune-up fight, as I mentioned, in boxing as well, and then talking with the money team as well, and talks to Deontay Wilder. He's said he's been looking at the PFL heavyweight tournament, and the winner of that may be his fighter, so that's interesting to see that. Big part of that as well is Bruno Capelozza, to me, who would be the standout to possibly fight him, has just failed the drugs test, so that kind of takes away one of the big possibilities there. Ante D'Elia is the other one. I actually think that'd be a good fight, and I think a lot of people have kind of scoffed at that. As someone who's covered PFL a lot, it's not as bad a fight as people are making out. But anyway, Also, I think I touched on this, but he wants, and he has guaranteed a minimum of $2 million for his opponent, which is absolutely great. He says he's still down to fight John Jones. That's not going to happen. And if it was up to him, his next opponent would be Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder. The other part from John Nash's, we've touched on most of this already. 2 to 3 fights, high 7 figures, split of the event's net profits. Now, split of the event's net profits. If it's a loss, does he have to pay for that? This would be my question with an MMA event. I don't think that'll be much, if I'm being honest. But let's see. A signing bonus to serve as an ambassador. Like, how much is that? That could be 20 quid. Like, who knows? Right to have his own sponsors in the cage, which is brilliant. The one thing I would say about that, though, is like Francis was the heavyweight champion. Like, did he have any big sponsors outside of the cage? You think you would have, like, so hopefully he gets him. And I think, like, if it is a big thing and he is headlining and it's a big opponent, he will get good sponsors, so that's some extra money as well. He can box, no champions clause, and minimum salary for his opponent, as you mentioned again. So yeah, those are the main points there on that. So some of the other points I want to touch on, right? So we've talked obviously a lot there for the last 25 minutes on Francis's point of view. From the sports point of view, and first of all, the PFL, I think this is a massive risk for the PFL. And without massive risk, you don't get massive reward, but you also don't get massive failure. So it'll be one of the two of them. I really think this will either be the making or breaking of PFL. And it's not just PFL. I think it would have been the same for Bellator if they'd given him this deal. It would have been the same for One Championship if they'd given him this deal. And I admire PFL for going out there, putting it all on the line, and taking a chance. A lot of MMA organizations have done it before, and every single one of them has failed, right? Even Bellator, they've done a great job of taking chances on young fighters over the last few years, but you could say that they're up for sale, and has that failed as well? Arguably, right? I hope, beyond hope, the PFL get through this, and I hope it's a success, right? I hope it is. But the MMA landscape is littered with the coffins of MMA promotions past, unfortunately, and it's going to be tough when you're handing out, what did I say there, a possible 21 million, possibly more, to one guy. That's a lot. It's a good guy to hit it out to. I was talking about Michael Jordan earlier on. He's a good guy to pay all that money to, so maybe he is the guy. But what if that guy leaves you high and dry and retires after three fights? Thanks for the cheese. Where are you then? That's tough. So I'm very interested. We will see how it goes with PFL. Like, I'd say a lot of organizations get one fight into that deal and be like, how about you do some more boxing there? just maybe not. Maybe we don't want to do that. We'll see how it goes. But from the sports point of view, this is great because it opens up the possibility of this to lots of other people. Now, it opens up the possibility of it to lots of other people. How many other people can do it? I would say almost none, right? Conor McGregor, John Jones, Adesanya maybe, Makhachev maybe, but anyone else, I don't think so. I really, there's a very specific brand of fighter who can actually do this. But it's brilliant that those brands of fighters have another option now to use against the UFC to get more money. Will the UFC do it? Will they even negotiate with this sort of thing? I would say probably not. Look what happened with Francis, but also look what's happened with even the kind of the lower down pay grade guys who are possible stars. They're not paying the Cedric Dumbes. They're not paying the Roberto Soldiches. They're not paying the Kayla Harrisons, the AJ McKees. They're not paying any of these people. Will it be different if it's another big star? Will they want to lose another one? We'll see. But the fact that is open, I think, is a brilliant thing for the sport. So let's close this out by talking about it from the fans' point of view, right? Now, the fans can look at it from a few different points of view. And I actually I don't think the fans should be hated on for looking at it from their point of view. They really shouldn't. If you're and let's take it from the obvious one here. We'll go straight at it. If your one is, Francis, I'm an MMA fan, right? And my next 4 fights for Francis are a boxing match. I don't care about boxing. This is not Sean. This is an MMA fan talking. It's Ante Delia. Who's Ante Delia? I've never watched the PFL. It's Bruno Capoloza. Who? Well, I saw him got one big knockout, but Francis is going to destroy him. And it's Derek Lewis when he gets out of the UFC, or it's Verdum, or it's, Renan Ferreira. If you are an MMA fan, you have every right to say, I've no interest in seeing any of those fights. I cannot believe Francis Ngannou left and left me in limbo with all the fights I didn't want to see. You absolutely have every right to say that, right? You have every right to say it, and I'm not going to shame anyone for saying that, right? But also, if you're an MMA fan and you look at it every week, and at the end of the day, I cover MMA, but I'm an MMA fan at the end of the day as well. And you look, like, I'm talking to lads all the time, and the more I do interviews and the more I talk to lads and see the struggle they're going through, the more I'm thinking, like, I cannot believe how mistreated a lot of these lads are. And when I see someone like Francis, a big part of the reason why I was like, oh, take the UFC money, was like, I didn't want something bad to happen, I didn't want him to lose out on money. And I'm so glad he's earned a lot of money. But from the fans' point of view, I know a lot of people feel that way as well. It's like, thank God this man's after getting paid. He deserves it. He's put on a lot of great fights. Look, he'll put on some great fights again. Are they the fights we want to see? Maybe not. Hopefully they'll put on some great ones. Hopefully they'll find a way. But, oh my God, I'm so happy he's getting paid. And that's fine. There's no problem with that opinion. There's no problem with either opinion. And look, I would say everyone's probably a little bit in the middle. There's some people who don't care about Francis. They wanted to fight John Jones for a $5, right? There's some people like that. There's other people who are like, I don't care, I just want him to get paid. And most people are in the middle, like everything in life. We'd love to see Francis getting paid a lot, but we'd also like to see him fight John Jones. We'd like to see him fight Jonathan Almeida after the weekend. We'd like to see him fight Ganya again, maybe, if Ganya gets a re-up, or Pavlovich, or whoever it might be. We all want to see that, and that's fine to admit to. That is fine to admit to, but it's such a complicated situation. It's such an interesting situation. And the thing about it as well is, I did a video on this 2 or 3 months ago, and I'm talking a little bit differently about it now. But also, I think a lot of people are saying this is the situation over. It isn't. It's not. I talk about the short term. Nothing has been decided short term, but I think a lot could change medium and long term as well. So this is a story that's going to go on and on and on and on. And we here in Sherdog.com will be here to cover it all the way. All right, I leave it there, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.